Hey Hermits, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my plans for November, so what I'm going to be reading this month. I'm not doing my usual thing of making a really strict TBR and then mood reading all month long, because what I want to accomplish this month is clearing the decks of all of the library books that I have out right now. So that includes physical library books, audiobooks I've borrowed, ebooks I've borrowed. I want to just get through all of those so that from December I can really focus on reading all of these many hundreds of unread books that you can see behind me. So let's dive straight in. And we'll start with the physical books. And I did talk you through the synopses of all of these in a recent reading vlog, so I'm not going to go too in depth. I'm just going to give you a gist in case you haven't seen that video yet. So first of all, we have Sugar by Bernice Mcmadden, and this is the story of a young black woman who moves to town. She's escaping her mysterious past and everyone is very suspicious of her, but she does make friends with the elderly lady next door. And it just feels like it's going to be one of those small town, learning to love each other kind of stories, which I'm always a big fan of. Then we have The Dating Playbook by Farah, and this is a sports romance between a former NFL player and the personal trainer that he hires on the sly. I believe they need to keep their working relationship secret, so they pretend that they're dating, and I'm assuming that it's gonna, unfold into a real love story. Then we have The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Howe. This is a historical fiction, but with a witchy vibe. So I believe this is set in the 1890s when these three witches join the suffragist movement, and there's going to be feminism, there's going to be magic. What more could you ask for, really? Then we have Madame Barova, which tells the story of a tarot reader and clairvoyant who is retiring. So she's packing up her stand on Brighton Pier and trying to get away from other people's problems. But of course, you know that other people's problems are going to be following her throughout this book. Next, we have Ghosts by Dolly Alderton, which tells the story of a 30-something-year-old woman who is like, what happened to my life? What is this adulting thing about? She's not married, she doesn't have the dream job, she doesn't have all of these things that she thought she would have. And then at some point she goes on this date with this guy, right? This first date. And on this first date, he tells her that he's going to marry her. And she's like, okay, let's see where this goes. And it tells the story of that whole situation. And then we have Seoul Tourists by Bernardine and Evaristo. This tells the story of two unlikely friends, one who is grieving the death of his father, one who is just sick to death of feeling like a failure in her career, who decide to go off on an adventure together. So they chart off across Europe and just explore some cultural landmarks, and I imagine find themselves along the way. So last but not least, from the physical books, we have Ripper by Isabel Allende. And I actually talked about this one in the vlog that I mentioned and got it wrong. So I was going by the synopsis that I read here and on Goodreads, but that doesn't actually encompass what the story's about. It doesn't really do it justice, and I'm only a couple of chapters in, but already I can see that the synopsis doesn't match the reality. So I'm going to tell you what it's about. So Ripper is this online game that has been created by this teenage girl. She's 16 at the time of this story, who is total child prodigy, really, really smart. And her mother is a Reiki practitioner and very hippy-dippy, very into alternative therapies, very the opposite of her regimental academic daughter. And so she escapes from the chaos of her day-to-day life into this elaborate game that she's created with friends from all over the globe. And she, as the game master, has set them all mysteries and problems to solve. And she initially started with Jack the Ripper cases and very old cold cases, and had them, like her friends and their alter egos, figure out what happened and resolve the crimes. But then at the start of our story, her godmother, who is like a renowned astrologer, makes this prediction that San Francisco is going to experience a bloodbath. Like there are going to be a series of murders happening in San Francisco where she lives, and you know, this is just going to happen. And so the girl decides, like, right, let's see about this, shall we? Because part of her wants to debunk her godmother, who's kind of eccentric and kind of annoying, and part of her wants to get to the bottom of what does go on in her city. So she tasks her little gang of friends, which includes her online friends and also her granddad, who's a trusty sidekick, to look at these current day murders and try to get to the bottom of them. And what we know from the very first page is that something happens throughout the story that leads to her mother getting kidnapped, and I'm not sure if she's held for ransom or if, like, I'm not sure what happens there, but she gets kidnapped and threatened, and that's said on, like, in the very first line of the very first page, so that's not a spoiler. And our protagonist has to race against the clock with her gang of crime solvers to get to the bottom of it and get her mother back safely. So really looking forward to this. As with any Allende book, it is quite a slow burn, so I'm not expecting to be able to inhale it like all in a couple of days, but that's okay, I've got a whole month. So now let's move on to the audiobooks. So first of all, I have Daisy Jones and the Six, and I do own a physical copy of that, but because it's told in essentially all articles and interviews and things like that, I just thought listening to it is going to be a more compelling way, because I often find that when I am like switching between formats of like interviews and letters and diary entries and and text exchanges and all of these different things, it pulls me out of the story. I don't get so sucked in, I don't care so much about the characters, and I just get the feeling that that's something that I'm really going to want while consuming Daisy Jones. So I've got the physical copy, I've got the audio copy, and I am committed to getting through that one this month because it has been on my radar for so long now. I've owned the physical copy since right after it came out. I have no excuses. I need to tick that one off my list. And then I also have The Black Dress by Deborah Mogak. I think that's how you pronounce her surname. So this tells a story of a woman named Prue whose husband has left her, and she's in a bit of a daze. Like, she feels very alone. She doesn't really know what she's doing with her life. And like at the beginning of the story, she goes to a friend's funeral, and while she's at this funeral, she's kind of thinking, this doesn't sound like my friend. This person that they're describing just doesn't sound like my friend. Turns out it's not. She's at the wrong funeral, but she's so comforted by like the formula of the funeral process that she just decides to keep going. And so she buys herself a black dress and just makes a habit out of going to all of these random funerals. And I don't really know how it's going to turn out, but I just think the premise is hilarious. So I'm definitely in for a good time with that one. Okay, now let's move on to the ebooks. The Affiliate Girls by Jane Healy. So this story starts in, I believe, 1973. It's definitely the early 70s. I don't know if I've remembered that date right, but it's the early 70s, and there's this group of girlfriends who are obsessed with a series of pre-Raphaelite paintings, and they decide that they're gonna reenact Ophelia. So if you've ever seen that painting, it's this like beautiful red-headed woman who is lying in a river drowning. And so like during the summer, this is what they're doing. Like, they're just feeling very whimsical and very melancholic, and they're reenacting this painting with each other. And at some point during this summer, tragedy strikes. Obviously we don't know what the tragedy is yet. I'm assuming one of them is going to die, and like that's the setup for the story. And then I believe like 25-ish years later, our main character is returning to like the place where this event took place, and like revisiting what happened, like unraveling what happened, all of that stuff. So I think it's going to be fun. I love that it's going to be infused with the art world and like the Shakespearean tragedy kind of vibes. I just think it's going to be a really stunning read. The cover is beautiful, so that's usually enough for me. Next we have The Cat Wears a Mask by Dolores Hitchens, and this is described as being Native American folklore mixed with a southwestern mystery, and essentially is about this woman named Rachel who solves cozy mystery type things with her cat. So I believe it's like a locked room kind of trope where she's at this cottage or this house with a group of friends. One of them dies under suspicious circumstances and they need to figure out who did. So next we have Sarong Party Girls by Cheryl Lulingtang, and this is described as like a glamorous East Asian version of Emma. And essentially it tells the story of this woman who's in her late 20s who decides that in the next few months she is going to make sure that all of her friends get married to some wealthy Western expats. So I just think it's going to be a really fun, good time. I really loved Crazy Rich Asians, and this is very much compared to that from what I've read online. So I think I'm really gonna just enjoy my time reading this book. Next we have No One Will Miss Her by Kat Rosenfeld, and this I think is very much a psychological thriller, so perfect for my reading mood right now. I'm very much in a thriller mood, so I think this is probably the one I'm going to start with. But this tells the story of this young woman who is from this small town from the wrong side of the tracks, and she goes missing. And when they start investigating her disappearance, everything leads to the big city, and specifically this woman who is like a wealthy Instagram influencer, and things are just not adding up. Like, how do these people know each other? How are they connected? What's going on here? We don't know. I love a thriller. I love a murder mystery. This seems like one that I haven't read before, because a lot of thrillers and a lot of mysteries, you could just change the character names and maybe like one or two of the settings and you've got the same stories, but this one just sounds very different to anything I've read before, so I'm looking forward to that. And then last but not least, I have a reread for me, The Crocodile on the Sandbank by Elizabeth Peters. Now this is the first in a very long cozy mystery series about this female archaeologist set in, I believe it's the 1920s, and I've read the first installment before many years ago now, really enjoyed it and definitely want to continue with the rest, but I feel like I want to reread that one just before I move on to the rest of the series, because honestly I can't remember much about the characters, I can't remember much about the premise, and I want to go in informed if I'm going to commit to reading this like 20 some book series. So those are all of the books that I'm going to attempt to read in the month of November. But do you know what? I'm not going to hold myself really strictly to this. So if I don't read everything, like nobody's going to die, but I'm going to really just try and get through as many of my library books as I can. So there we go, my TBR, my reading plans for the month of November. Now I would love to hear from you, so pop into the comments and tell me, out of all of the books that I've mentioned in this video, which one do you think I should start with? I know I mentioned that I'm feeling kind of a thriller, but with that insight aside, what would you be interested in seeing me read next? So pop that in a comment below and I will see you next time. Don't forget to hit subscribe before you go, but TTF.